Welcome to Creating Better Products, where we explore the real world stories from product leaders, not just their successes, but also their failures and their lessons learned. You will get practical tips that you can apply tomorrow. And today I will be talking to Abdo Wahba about storytelling with data. Just having data isn't enough, because data can tell many stories. And Abdo shares that data actually isn't the hero of the story. It is the message that we want to convey. The message is the change that we want to achieve in people. And that can be, we want them to feel differently, think differently, or act differently. Abdo shares his tips on how we can achieve that. So join me for a really fascinating conversation with Abdo Wahba on storytelling with data. So Abdo is a CPO, presentation coach, and an exited founder. And Abdo, you told me that you're super passionate about creating business storytellers and presenters. And actually, I had the pleasure of being coached by you for the Productized conference, which was an amazing experience. I don't think I could have given the presentation that I did without your help. So thank you. And now I'm really excited that we will talk about how we tell stories with data. So, Abdo, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. And thank you for the very warm welcome.
Yeah, always, always. What should people know about you beyond what I just told them? Presentation coach, CPO, exited founder.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this whole product leadership thingy for the past 18 plus years. I think I'm approaching 19 or 20 now. And I started early, very early because I was just lucky. I stumbled upon a product management job before it was even called product management and before anyone really thought it was something interesting and cool to do. And I've had the good fortune of visiting more than 7 industries working in software. And by software, I mean everything from apps to web SaaS software to desktop software, B2B software, B2C software. I worked in the aerospace, the automotive industry, oil and gas industry, publishing, media, telecom, mobile auctioning, hotel tech space, retail tech, health tech. I had the good fortune of visiting many industries, and throughout this time, I've always had I've always had an eye and a passion for telling strong stories, doing good presentations, because I noticed that a strong presentation can really have a strong impact. In fact, it could perhaps change history. And maybe if you want to look at the grand scheme of things, one can argue that every big historical event was preceded by a strong speech or a strong presentation. And if you want to bring it down to something you can maybe think about and grasp with your hands, in the company where you work, whether it's yours, founded by you, or you're employed there, every strategic event in the company was preceded by a strong presentation, be it the pitch of the company to the investors, be it the pitch to the biggest clients, the first very big client, or the strategy update, or the shift, the pivoting moment of the company being communicated to the rest of the team. It's all preceded by a strong presentation and strong narrative and communication. And yet, 73.68% of all presentations just flat out suck. They suck. They're boring, they're mind numbing. They motivate people to do other stuff and get distracted and open their phones and start chatting, start doing their email and start tuning them out. Yeah? Despite being such a massively important tool. And this is what makes me really annoyed and almost angry. And that's why I decided, you know what, I think I can do something about it. I've had the good fortune and to be shown how this is done better and differently. And that's why I decided a long time ago I want to make speakers and presentations not suck, one speaker at a time. And that's how over the time I've managed to deliver over 1,500 hours of coaching, mainly focused on communication, storytelling, presentations. And yeah, and today we're here to talk more about that.
Yeah. What was that pivotal moment where you said, I have to help people with storytelling? Was there a pivotal moment?
There were several. but it was not. It wasn't like a light shining from the sun dawning on me moment. It was more of, oh my God, what the hell is this guy doing and losing the audience, and I'm in the audience, and like, why are you doing this? But there was a pivotal moment where I decided, okay, I think I can do this for a living, more or less. In my last company, I had already done this, maybe, I don't know, over 1,000 hours or over 1,200 hours. But I used to do it just because, okay, I have a problem. My team isn't presenting well. I'm doing, I think this person can use this coaching and so on. But in one of the companies where I worked, there was an all hands meeting, and the CEO of the company was doing a presentation in this all hands meeting. And as luck would have it, I was sitting right in front of him while he was like in the meeting room presenting. And then afterwards, of course, I mean, I felt like, okay, well, I mean, a bit of Fremdschämen, a bit of feeling embarrassed for others, the beautiful German word, and I had a lot of Fremdschämen for him. And he was a smart person, and he noticed. And he said, "Abdu, what do you think after the presentation?" He said, "What do you think of the presentation? I noticed something on your face." And I told him, do you want to hear an Egyptian way of saying it?" He said, "Yes, what is it?" I said, "Okay, in Egypt we say, do you want the truth or its cousin?" Okay, what the hell does this mean? I told him, yeah, I mean, do you want me to tell you the truth, or do you want me to kind of tell you something that you want to hear? He said, no, no, tell me the truth. And I told him, the truth is, you sucked hard. I mean, sure, there were interesting things here and there, but it really sucked. I was in the first row, and I am deeply invested in you, me personally, deeply invested in you delivering this message to the audience, because this underlines the plans that we're working on and so on. And yet, I was struggling to pay attention to you. So definitely, all the others were not there. And he was like, okay, you know what? If you can do better, be my guest. So, sure, let's do better. And then we worked on it. We worked together on several versions on several other all hands presentations. And the difference was massive. We started getting proactively positive feedback from others saying, hey, oh my God, this was awesome. Hey, this is the first time in years where I really felt that energized by the presentation. I can now really believe in what you're saying, and I believe in the vision despite you having communicated it before, but now I can really see it and believe it and so on. So the impact was there. And this was the moment where I was like, okay, this seems interesting. And then the one moment that really solidified it was this CEO had another presentation outside the company, and then we worked together on it a little bit. I gave him pointers, and then he was like, "Okay, you know what? The shareholders are asking me to work with a presentation with a coach on this." Sure, I mean, I have no ego invested in this. And then he went and he came back and he said, "You know what? The guy said a few things, but he said everything that you told me. Everything that he said, you already told me before." I was like, "Okay, this seems like something that could be worth sharing with the rest of the world, not just me fixing a local problem for myself or for my work or for the company where I'm in." And that's when I decided, okay, I think I need to go public with this and not just do it internally for my teams.
I love it. I love it. I'm almost now. I want to ask the question. Can you remember a time when you really sucked at storytelling?
Oh, wow, definitely. I can remember so many times. In fact, one of them was with data. There was a company I worked for, worked in the hotel tech space. And back then, the product we worked on was essentially used by hoteliers to get more better, authentic reviews published by their guests on their platform of choice, be it Google,
Mhm.
their own website, TripAdvisor, Booking, and so on and so forth. And we did a bit of a study showing that not only if you ask your audience to review you, like if the guest uh, leaves and you send them, hey, if you enjoyed your stay, please click here to review. Chances are the average score of your reviews will go higher. Meaning, um, you know, not meaning, but essentially what was behind it was people proactively submit a review for their experience if they are extremely happy or if they are pissed. But there is a silent majority who are happy and are willing to submit a review, but it's just not on the radar. And as soon as you ask them, they will give you a good review because their experience was good. And thereby, if you proactively ask your audience, your score will go up because you
Mm-hmm.
have more of the silent people who would not review, but they give you a good review. And I was supposed to kind of present this finding. Like it was a hypothesis in the company for a long time, but then I did a study on the data. Like we study on the data and was able to prove this with data. And one of the biggest mistakes I did was I put together the numbers, and the moment I saw the numbers, I said, "Cool, I'm going to present it." And just went up with the numbers saying, "Oh, here we had two groups of users, those who have submitted reviews without being prompted, and here's the other group, and here's the average score from this group and average score from that group." And then people started asking me questions. So does this mean that the unprompted is better or the prompted is worse? And I started giving so many complex and nuanced answers that I didn't even know at the end what am I talking about anymore. And the audience was so confused, and I was so confused, and I was given like the worst feedback of my life, which was not true at all. Like to the image I had of myself, where the COO came and said, "Listen, Abdo, I think you need way more time before we put you in front of customers and to sell our product." And I was really angry because this was I was it was a very trivial mistake that I did that gave this impression. Well, I was well aware that if I stood in front of an audience, I would be able to sell the product and convince them. But the fatal mistake that I did was I saw the numbers and felt like, yeah, that the numbers good. I have the conclusion in my head. I'm just going to go and present them. And I tanked like nobody's business. Seriously, this was a very vivid moment that I have until now that I lean into every time my laziness says, "Yeah, but you already have the conclusion in your head." And you go, "Nope, remember last time? Okay, shape up and prepare it well."
So what's the trick now? It's not rushing to sharing. It's taking the time to think, how will I share and communicate the information?
Yes, it takes also another step. One of the things that I did wrong was I didn't formulate clearly in simple and concrete terms what the data is supposed to tell the audience.
Mm.
And this is essentially one of the things that I do in my coaching is figure out what exactly is the message you are trying to deliver. And you and me, we've had this discussion a few times, but this applies not only to presenting or storytelling with data, but to any kind of presentation you want to do. So, and this is actually one of those things that people just don't do or get wrong out of habitual training or habits resulting from incorrect training. If you observe how the educational process works, where we experience a lot of presentations in form of lectures, you are in
Mm.
school or in university, and there's a professor or a teacher who stands up and talks about something, and then they leave. And whether they explain it well or not is a function of their ability and their desire and the materials or tools available for them. But it's on the student to make sure that they understood. If you're in the audience, you are trying to rack your brain around the differential equation this professor just wrote on the board, or the principles of motivation by Maslow, or Porter's five forces of analyzing a market, or whatever. You're trying to wrap your head around this, and you are exerting effort to understand, and you are taking notes in order not to forget. Why? Because there is an external motivation, there is an external incentive for the audience to do that. There's an exam or there's a project, and if you don't do this, you will not pass, you will fail.
Mm.
And you want, your desire is to pass, so that you pass the exam, you pass this class, you go to the next class, and eventually you have a degree that hopefully opens up the job market for you, and then you get employed, and then you get some money or whatever other path. But essentially you want to go through this process, and you have a motivation that is very strong for you to pay attention. But if you are presenting in a company or in an event where there is no exam for the audience to go through based on your material, this motivation is no longer there. And therefore, it is on you, the speaker, to capture and keep and hold the audience's engagement and attention. And you will not be able to do this if you think about, okay, what do I want to talk about today? That's how it will definitely not work.
Yeah.
Instead, you have the audience in front of you, and you want to tell them something. You want them to leave with something specific in their minds, hearts, and or souls after they leave the presentation. And this is what you start with. What is the message? And I can continue on for half an hour talking about this. So I'm gonna take a break in case you need to ask another few questions, and I'm pretty sure you have 100 different ones.
Oh, so many, so many. I'll have to like prioritize in my mind which ones I go for. Um, and maybe I'll take a small step back and thinking about storytelling with data. How
Yes.
does that make it special and different from other storytelling? What are the specific aspects that we have to be aware of when we want to tell stories with data?
When you want to tell a story with data, you have to figure out what exactly is the conclusion. Because or because a story, sorry, data in itself is not very useful. It's what the data enables and or informs. If you are presenting the results of a study, you want the audience to do something or think about something or feel about something differently than they did before. If you did a cohort analysis of your users and realized that the reason or potential reasons for churn are that the users forget to use your app, or it's not essential for them, or it's not easy for them to get into the habit of using it, and you have data for that, this is what you're trying to communicate, not the data in itself.
Mm.
If you ran a study, or if you're pitching a new project and you did an analysis of historical performance of similar products or projects or features or whatever, and you have put together a business case showing that this will make money if you implement it, it's not about the numbers of the business case, or it's not about the numbers of your analysis. It's about selling to your stakeholders, convincing your stakeholders that there is money to be made if we pursue this. And
Yeah.
this is the biggest issue. This is the biggest mistake. It's whenever we want to present data, we forget that the data is not the hero. The data is only an enabler to the message. I've I've done this a while ago when I worked in a company. We had a loyalty program for users, which basically when they interacted more with our apps, if they interacted more with the content of our apps, they would get points, and those points translate into vouchers of their choice and so on. And for some reason, like we had some issues with customers, and they said, "Yeah, we have to shut it down," and we shut it down completely. And we decide, okay, we shut it down and we revisit it in 6 to 12 months and see if it's worth launching again. And one of the reasons cited for shutting it down was we have 2% of the users scamming us and generating 80% of the engagements, and thereby That's why the customers, like another stakeholder, like another party on the platform, they felt, oh, the engagement that you're getting on our content and material is faked because it's fraud and so on. And this was the claim. So we decided, you know what? Okay, 6 to 12 months later, we investigate, and I realized, okay, I did a deep analysis, and I realized, no, that's not the case. It's not the case of 2% delivering 80%. It's actually those 2% of fraudsters who had weird usage patterns. They generated 3% of the traffic, but there was 30% below them that generated 80%. So the loyalty program was a success in itself. And in order to get to this point, I had to swim through oceans of data, doing cohort analysis on different cohorts, doing percentile analysis, figuring out how many people did this, and like oceans and oceans of data. And the mistake that I would have done, but I didn't because I learned from the previous time, would have been to walk the audience through my analysis process, to tell them, oh, first I looked at this, and then I looked at that, and then I looked at this version of the data, and then I did cohort analysis, and then I looked at those averages, and then I said, no, let's flip them the other side. And after 45 minutes of explaining my process, I tell them, so in conclusion, the project actually it is worth economically and from an user interaction point of view, it is worth doing. After, I mean, if I had walked them through this analysis and just said that in the end, I would have lost them in the middle, definitely 100%.
Hmm.
Instead, what I did was, listen, guys, I did an analysis, and this is the hypothesis. The hypothesis I was trying to test or validate or invalidate. I was trying to figure out what first, a few things. I can't remember how many, but a few things. One, is it the case of 2% or 3% between brackets, between the quotes, of the users generating 80% of our traffic? Do you have a massive skew that can indicate fraud? Yes or no? Second, is it the case of 5% or 10% of all of users generating 80%, meaning the program isn't really generating real engagement and real diverse engagement of traffic sourced from multiple users for our partner platforms? Yes or no? And then, is it economic?
Hmm.
And in this study, I tackled the first two because the third question is a function of how we want to do it in the future, and it includes basically the next steps that I suggest. So to answer the first question, is it the case? The analysis says no, it's not the case. Why? Because here is the top 2% or top 3% that exhibited behavior that we can define as fraud, or like meaning programmatic. Like they instead of interacting, they wrote spiders and crawlers and whatever to kind of keep collecting points and so on. This is the definition of it, because I mean, we made a definition of it. Here is the definition. You agree on it? Yes, we agree. This is 3%, less than 3% of all users. Okay, and how much traffic did they generate? Not more than 5% of the traffic. Okay, cool. Question number one answered. If they wanted details, I would have gone into details, but I would have kept it for the audience, because I was doing it for the team of executives, so I had to kind of stay on a certain level of abstraction, not dive too deep
Yeah.
in order not to derail the conversation, which is another mistake I would have done earlier, like before. I would have let the conversation to go in a lot of depth in the data. And how did you calculate this? Did you use the median or the average? But what is the statistical significance on this mean? Is forget all of this. I can,
Yeah.
bringing back the conversation to the main line. And this is also something that is very important when you are telling stories with data. You start with the conclusion, like, okay, what does the study tell us? It tells us X. It tells us that it is not the case of 2% of the users generating 80% of the traffic. It is not the case of 10% of the users generating 90% of the traffic. It is the case of a regular 80/20. In fact, it was a case of 35/65. It was 35% of the users generating 65% of the traffic. So there is a skew, but it is within the normal range.
Mhm.
It is expected to be like this. Actually, it's not even 80/20. It's nicer. Yeah. And this means we don't have a problem of the fraud engagement being a factor here. We can completely we can fight it. We can put anti-fraud measures. But even if we completely ignore it, it's not a factor uh, in our reporting. Doesn't affect the actual that we deliver actual genuine engagement from users. And the mistake would have been if someone asked me, okay, how did you calculate this? That I allow the discussion to go down the rabbit hole of data analysis and so on. This is something else to be really mindful of. And because in the end, what was I aiming at? I was aiming at a decision. I
Mhm.
wanted to tell the audience, okay, the original discussion was should we revive this loyalty program, yes or no? And the debate was we shouldn't revive it because it was dominated by fraud. And I was arguing, no, it's not dominated by fraud. Or, you know what? Let's see the date if the data says that it's dominated by fraud. So, therefore, the data said it's not dominated by fraud because one, two, three. And therefore,
Yeah.
the decision. This is the hero. This is the message. This is what I was trying to achieve. If I did not have clarity on this, I would have gone through all of the mistakes I did before. And this, unfortunately, this is something nobody teaches product managers and product leaders. Product leaders learn this the hard way, like I did. When they do
Yes.
several presentations and they feel like they're not getting through, and then they have the awareness: what am I doing wrong in my storytelling? Why are they not convinced? Instead of thinking, oh, those freaking stakeholders, they never listen. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's how I tell the story, how I communicate it. Yeah? And yeah, that's one of those
Yeah, I
examples.
really love it. So I love the statement, the data is not the hero.
Yes.
It's the message that you want to communicate. And maybe not even the message, but what you said is it's the action that we want people to take after hearing
Yes.
the message.
Actually, I mean, when I say message, I mean, I have a specific relationship between action and message. An action is a type of message. Essentially, when I say
Mm.
message, I mean one of the following. We do presentations or in a business setting, be it in a conference or internally within the company, to achieve one of three things. There's no third. It's one of those three. We want the audience to think differently about something, or we want the audience to feel differently about something, or we want the audience to do something differently after they leave the presentation. So it's one of those: think, feel,
Yeah.
act. That's what I want to change with my presentation, be it data or other. With data, it's usually an action or stopping and like invoking an action or stopping an action, a stupid action. Yeah. And that's why I kind of, okay, it's usually that, but it's not always that.
Hmm.
Sometimes I want to change people's ideas about something. I had a case, for example, where we had an app that distributed specific marketing content that was a bit niche and premium and nice, and it was more of like it had a use case of entertainment and engagement other than it being marketing content. And there was a desire from our customers to also run display ads within the app, yeah, and within the products in general, app and web and everything. And there was a lot of resistance coming from the team because they were arguing, hey, the user experience will be impacted, the users will be upset, they will leave, we will get shitty reviews, we will have a lot of churn, and we don't want to do this. So fine, no problem. Let's do a test. Let's run an A, B, C, D, E, F, G multivariant test, the variants that you deem fit, and see what the numbers tell us. If we run the test with display ads and the revenue per user over the other content drops, then then you guys are right, and I can argue this for the executive suite, saying we have to make a strategic decision, either this or that. or in some form. So we ran the test, and at the end, what we realized was that the display ads had zero effect on any other revenue and zero effect on the users. There was no churn, there was no dip in activity, there was no decrease in engagement with the original content. In fact, we didn't even make less money. In some cases, like within the margin of error, we made some more money, but I attributed this to margin of error. But suddenly we have a new revenue stream. Yeah. So I sat down the guys and told them, listen, I understand the user experience of display ads is frustrating to those who build apps, but we are not the users. How many of you are a user? How many of us, including me, are actually a user of this app, of our apps? None of us, because we're not in our target market. So, therefore, the data here shows, you see here, we ran the test for a number of weeks. The revenue per user in the control is X. The revenue per user in the variant A from that had display ads is the same, and the variant B is also the same. And so it's the same. It's the same, except that variant B makes more money from ads than variant C, and all of the other variants make us more money than the one without display ads. So the issue was dropped.
Hmm.
And here I wanted to make them feel differently because I understood that it's coming from an emotional place rather than from a rational place. I wanted to make them feel, listen, guys, there's no harm in this. We are not going to lose it. See, I want you to feel safe about this. See, it is safe for us to go about this. So I wanted to change how they feel, or at least how they think, okay, you know what? We thought there will be an impact. There's no impact. We don't like it. We think it's shit, but it works. So I
Yeah.
had to craft the message to impact this. There was no real action expected from them other than stop whining about display ads. But in the end, it was more about feeling. So that's why a message can be: I want the audience to do, think, or feel differently about something after they leave the presentation.
Yes. So it's all about creating change in our audience for one of those three things.
Yes.
And what I think is also really beautiful about the story that you shared is the deep understanding of your audience, understanding that they felt anxious about this topic, and your sole goal was to make them feel safe and crafting a message that would help them feel safe. I think that's really powerful and very beautiful.
This is one of those rare cases when you know about your audience enough to actually tailor your message exactly to the point. It is more often than not that you stand in front of an audience and don't necessarily know what they're thinking or what they're feeling or what their stance is about what you're about to say. However, if you are doing a presentation within the company that you work in, your odds are better than if you are doing a presentation in a meetup or a conference.
Yes.
In fact, if you are doing a presentation to convince a stakeholder of something, chances are, if you've been working there for more than a year, chances are you know exactly what they want or what they will resist or what their attitude is. And this is something you have to keep in mind. This is super important. Who is
Yeah.
your audience? In a lot of cases, when I ask, when I'm going in a conference or whatever, and I ask who is the audience, they say, yeah, the audience are product leaders and managers with roughly between 2 and 15 years of experience in various industries. The female male split is 60/40. That's great. But what am I going to do with that?
Yes.
Yeah. But if you're in your company and you're doing a presentation to the CEO or the top management to get approval on a, because you're pitching an idea and you want their approval to move forward, you have a much better chance in figuring out, okay, what do I need to say to make this person convinced of my idea, to sign off on my idea? And this is one of the homework that a lot of people just don't do. They start with thinking, what do I want to talk about? But in this sentence, where is the audience? You know, in the message, you think about what do I want the audience to feel, think, or do after they leave. You're thinking about the audience. Better yet, who are my audience, or who is within my audience, and what do they need to hear in order to digest and accept my message and act on it.
So, what do we do in those situations where we can't find out about our audience, where we're speaking at a conference and we're wanting to tell a story with data, but we don't know more beyond the high level uh, statistics like you shared about demographics, job title, and how long they years of experience.
Yes, this is a good chance for product managers to rely on a muscle that we all have, which is visualizing our ICP, our ideal customer profile. And in almost none of the exercises where we put together an ICP for a startup or scale up, are we 100% sure that this ICP exists, let alone is our ICP? We can only make assumptions and validate some of them and not be able to validate some of them. And the way we validate is through sampling, not necessarily by asking every single freaking user of their desires and motivations and aspirations in life and making a profile for them. Some companies do and can, but that's not your average Joe, the average case. Yeah. And therefore, we have to make assumptions. The same applies for if you're going to a conference. You ask the organizers as much information as they can deliver, but then you have to decide who is my ICP? Am I addressing the product leaders, or am I addressing the product managers and product people early in their stage between 0 and 3 to 5 years? Or am I addressing the very senior principal individual contributors? Or am I addressing a subset of those? When you make this decision, you can ask yourself, okay, I'm going to address the product leaders. So, what are the things that I need them to know? What are the things that they know already? And what are their plans? What is the message I want the product leader to leave with? Yeah. And if you get your message, you can start thinking, okay, I want the product leaders to believe that storytelling is their differentiator in their company, in their field. Okay, how can I convince a product leader of this? And when you start arguing this case, you start arguing this message, you'll find that convincing a product leader that storytelling is super important for them is very different than convincing a junior or an individual contributor. You will argue completely different cases. Maybe you will have similar arguments, but it's a completely different presentation.
Yeah,
And therefore, you have to make a decision. You have to decide, who is my ICP going to be?
I love it. So we're creating that hypothesis and we'll argue it in our mind from their perspective based on what we believe they know and the different things that we believe might convince them.
Yes,
And we'll have that inner argument with ourselves, plus maybe argue it on stage when we're presenting
yes,
in front of them to take them along on that journey.
yes, that is it. And I believe that this is not the common case, because some people will say, okay, I never know about my audience and so on. The common case is not presenting on stage for a product manager or a product leader. The common case is the everyday grind of presentations and meetings and stakeholder management and expectations management and managing up and perceptions management and getting the opt-in. Those are situations where you are actually presenting stuff to people you know. I had a colleague of mine. I love her. She we understood each other very well, but we butt heads like nobody's business. all in good faith and good spirits, and we can argue and get heated, but both of us knew and know that it's coming from a good place. And after the argument, if it got out of line, one of us will reach out to the other one and say, "Hey, it got a little bit heated. I'm sorry about that." He said, "Yeah, no problem. I know it's coming from a good place." But every time I had to argue something for her, I knew that she is more oriented towards immediate action and immediate gains rather than strategic wins. So anything I wanted to pitch to her to kind of to rally her behind my idea so we can make it happen, or because I need her teams to do stuff with my teams and so on, I had to really focus on that. I focused on,
Yeah.
okay, first start with the immediate gains and the immediate pains that will be relieved and how big they are. And then think about and talk about the future and whatever.
And I really love that. But you also had a really interesting framing, which was it's the everyday grind of convincing our stakeholders.
Yes.
And what I observe is that often people forget that we need to use storytelling in those situations and take people along that journey. What's your tip to people in that everyday grind who tend to forget that every single interaction with a colleague where we're trying to convince them or get them to change in terms of thinking, feeling, or acting, that we need to think about our storytelling?
The tip that I give, I mean, I was asked this question before, and I was asked if, in the everyday grind, nobody has the time to put together a presentation and think about the method and arguing and telling stories and all of this. I mean, I have a meeting in 30 minutes. What should I do? And I need to convince them. If there's one thing only that you can do is have absolute clarity on your message. Like if you have 30 minutes, I mean, there are things out there that say, okay, spend 50% of your time crafting what you want to say, and then 25 how you want to say it, and then 25 rehearsing. Fine, that's doable. It's fine. But if you have 30 minutes, I need to jump into a meeting and talk, and you are going to do only one thing for the 30 minutes, it's crafting your message. What is it that you want the audience to do differently after you finish the meeting? And when you have clarity on this, then think about, what do I need to do to convince them of this? Those are like think the message, and the rest will, if you do only the message, at least you put your mind in a mindset, you put your head in a mindset where, okay, I want to achieve this objective. I have this clarity and I need to argue it. Okay, I can improvise arguing for the message. But if I'm there to talk, okay, what do I want to talk about? I want to talk about this, talk about that, talk about that, you'll get nowhere.
Yeah. And that's really great. I wanted to ask you, which is what is like one thing that someone can do to get started? And that sounds like the one thing. Think about the message that you want to
Yes.
communicate, and then what are the things that you need to do and say to bring that message across?
Yes. I can share another thing that would make you immediately a much better storyteller. Assuming that you have your message correctly and you already invested the time and effort to put it together, the one thing that can really make you a strong storyteller is actually quite simple: tell stories. In a business setting, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it's a heritage or a legacy from the previous decades of this world. Doesn't matter. But I have observed that whenever we start talking business or talking, I don't know, whatever, something serious, we have to get abstract, and we have to talk about efficiency and effectiveness and normalization and democratization and scalability and stuff that in itself it has meaning, of course, but it is abstract. Now, why is that an issue? Why is that a problem? It is a problem because human beings do not engage with abstract concepts. There is a minority, a small minority of human beings, that if you give them an abstract concept, by nature they will take it, start visualizing it, they start imagining it, they start running scenarios in their heads, and they're like, "Yep, I'm with you." But those are the minority. Those are the A students who sat in the front row in the university and took notes, and everybody would copy their notes. Yeah. How many A students are there in any class? Not more than 5%. Yeah. So, but if you're in a business, if you're doing a presentation, not in an academic setting where the student is incentivized to get good grades and listen to you to get good grades, people will tune you out. The 95%, the remaining 95% will tune you out. Why? Because abstract concepts, they only address one part of the human being in front of you listening to you. They address their intellect.
Mhm.
Meaning, I give you, just like I did now, ideas address the intellect. This is an idea, very abstract. Now, what does it mean? It's just I'm giving you some information. And this information doesn't have any soul, doesn't have any feeling, doesn't have any color or shape or form. It's just a meaning. Now, in order for me, at least with you now, Sabrina, I need to give you the tools to create a picture around this meaning. And that's what a good story does. If you tell a story about someone having said or did something with someone else that demonstrate this concept, immediately you are invoking your audience's imagination and emotions. And this is what you need. If I had told you, I did a presentation about data, and all I did was present the data sets and go through the numbers. Or, yeah, I did a presentation about data where I showed the results and I showed the hypothesis and I showed the way leading from the hypothesis to the result. And I showed that the result doesn't match the conclusion previously drawn from it. I can see in your eyes that you're almost falling asleep. But surprise, this is a version of the story that I told about the loyalty program,
Yeah.
and the same version about the one with the story of the reviews. But I need in order for me to make sure that you're engaged, I have to tell you. I stood in front of the people. I told them this. I told them that. I said the conclusion is the first question. The answer to the first question is no. And I looked at the people and we said, yeah, that's fine. And they started challenging me. There's people doing and saying things to other people. In other
Hmm.
words, gossip.
Ooh.
Think gossip. Human beings, we are hardwired to be deeply and naturally interested in gossip. I don't know why, doesn't matter. There are dozens of multi-billion-dollar industries that are entirely based in gossip. The news industry is based in gossip. The sports industry is mainly based in gossip. The whole movie celebrity industry thing, the celebrity industry is based in gossip. I can go on and on. It's all about stories and people talking about other people having done this or said that, or oh my god, this is hilarious, or oh my god, this is blasphemous, oh my god, this is amazing. Someone did something somewhere, and this is what draws our attention. For some reason, when we start talking about business, we cut this part out of our presentations. I don't know why, but if I ever meet the person who started this practice, I'm going to slap them on the face. But I'm pretty sure I
But
won't
now
be
we
able
can
to.
counter it.
Sorry?
Now we can get everyone. Now we can counter that by getting everyone to talk about someone did something somewhere to someone.
Yeah, gossip. Somebody did
Gossip.
something that's very likely to be interesting because it's a human being who has done something. And
Yeah.
and if I meet this person who made up this weird thing, I don't think I will ever meet them because they're probably dead. Because this is I think this is something that happened in the 40s, 50s, 60s or something. But anyway, speak to the nature of human beings. We are deeply interested in what other people do, what other people think, what other people say. So use it to your advantage. Tell stories,
Yes.
gossip.
Gossip. Wow. That is actually super surprising. Hearing the word gossip is going to make you a better storyteller, but I really love it. Do you have a pro tip that someone can use who is already a really good storyteller, but they want to take their storytelling to the next level?
Yes. My secret pro tip that is not a secret at all and will no longer be a secret because I'm going to mention it now. But let's put it this way. When I want to learn about interesting ways of storytelling or watch masters at work, I have three sources, three things that I go and watch. One is very obvious. It's TED Talks, but that's obvious and not maybe not for everyone. And you have to find the right talk about the right topic to be engaged. But the two other ones are actually interesting, and you can watch them for the entertainment purpose. Yeah, for entertainment, not only for for learning. One is stand-up comedians. Stand-up comedy.
Mm.
If you watch stand-up comedians, they are brilliant storytellers. Mind you, they're not really trying to achieve anything with their story other to get a laugh and entertain you. But when you listen to them, how they structure their story, how they portray the feelings of the people in the story, how they portray the thought process and make it transparent and tell you, and how they engage you, and the way they describe things, it's their craft. Learn from them. The other source is even more obscure. At least it's interesting for me. It's watching lawyer shows or lawyer movies, like series and movies that have like about lawyers or have at least a lot of scenes where the lawyers do the opening and closing arguments, especially American series in this case, because by nature the lawyers have to be strong public speakers because they stand in court and argue stuff, they present stuff, and they have to convince the audience of the judge or the jury or whatever you're in, and however your judicial system operates, they have to convince someone of your case. So in reality, this is very high level of public speaking on average. Now, in movies and series, this is produced and scripted, so it's even more polished. So when you watch it, this is like the textbook example. This is the way to go, because not only are they putting on a performance for the court, for the people in this fake court, they are putting on a performance to be extremely entertaining. So you can really learn from. I learned a lot of tricks from them, from just watching legal shows here and there.
Amazing. I love it. I think I've exhausted almost all the questions I can ask you, and you shared some really amazing tips. I wonder before we go, can you tell us why do you think it's so important for product leaders to be able to tell great stories, and how does that impact creating better products? Or does it?
It does. I'm going to tell you a tangential story to highlight my point.
I love it.
A friend of mine, he's a academic person, but he also did a startup for a while. So he's really good in pitching and presenting to people and telling stories. He was hired by a university recently because they realized, or not the university realized, the university has a strong research program, but they have to apply to get grants for to finance those research programs or the research projects. And the grant authorities, the agencies that give those grants, have realized that since Gen AI became accessible to everyone, the written proposals have become very polished to the extent that the grant authority is no longer able to distinguish which one is good, or they are no longer able to discern whether the people behind the grant are really strong and in this technical field, and or will be able to deliver on the deliverables that that are written in the proposal. And therefore the grant authorities are now demanding and mandating that the professors and the academics who are behind the projects to pitch their project to the grant authority, because now all the written proposals are of the same quality. Previously they were not, now they are. And therefore, okay, who is better than who? I need to see the people. So, in the age of AI, where anybody can put together a document or anybody can put together a presentation, a super polished presentation about any framework or any methodology in 3 to 5 prompts, what the AI can still not do is come up with the stories and that will deliver this message and come up with your personal touch, or at least discern the stories and examples that deliver your personal touch on the framework. And actually this personal touch of stories and examples is what makes it land. This is what delivers the message at the end. This is what convinces your audience at the end. So not only is it important for a product manager, because this is all we do, we spend 90% of our time trying to convince others to do stuff that they may or may not necessarily want to do without having any authority, any official and formal authority over them and over their work. So with and now knowing that anybody can come up with this stuff with AI, it's your storytelling skills that will set you apart in getting shit done within your work.
Yes. And how does that impact the products we create directly? So it's does my product get built or another? I like that. How does it help get our product better, the one that we built?
Imagine you have a like similar to the situation where I had with my team. I mean, I had this multiple times. Um, to give it a title before diving into the story, essentially, if you are able to tell a strong story to your team about improving and making your product better and why it needs to be better and how it will be better, you will unleash and unlock their creativity and motivation and excitement to actually make this product better with you. Instead of thinking, here come the product people again with their bullshit ideas, and now I have to figure out how to deliver it, and this is complete bullshit because we have so much technical debt and we don't have full test coverage, and we need to revise the architecture again here and there and so on. Instead of getting this, if you are able to tell a strong story and tell them, listen, guys, I understand that there's technical debt, and I understand that we have to revise the architecture. At the same time, there is this massive opportunity, and here is why it's a massive opportunity, and here's why it's important to you who are QA engineers or developers or stakeholders that may or may not necessarily benefit from this massive opportunity in a very obvious way. Here's how it will benefit you in a very concrete way. Using examples and stories, you will get them. Without examples and stories, you still operate in a realm of maybe what you're saying is bullshit.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Abdo, for the amazing stories, the real examples that helped me really step through the different tips that you were giving. Thank you so much. One final question before we go. What are 3 books, articles, podcasts, something you would recommend people to listen to? Things that inspire you personally.
So the number one book I would recommend for people to do better storytelling presentations, speeches, is a very obscure book I came across in Egypt, where I'm from. In the book, there's an annual book fair, and the American University was selling books in there, and it's called "How to Do a Damn Good Speech, Even If You Have No Time to Prepare."
Ooh, I love the title.
Yeah, let me look it up. This is one of those books. I mean, I've converted to audiobooks and ebooks a very, very long time. But this is actually one of those books that I brought with me when moving from Cairo to Berlin. I brought with me to put it in my very limited and small library bookshelf here. And this is a book that whenever I join a company, I have the company buy a few copies to keep it within their stack of books that nobody touches anyway. But at least this is one of those books I have to keep there.
Is it available in English?
Yes, it is in English. How to give a
Is
damn
it in
good
English?
speech, even when you have no time to prepare. It is in English. It's an American book. It's actually quite old, but it's awesome. It has the essence. This is where I learned, oh, the message is the thing, and the way they structure it and how to argue it and so on. It's very simple. In fact, the whole methodology is in 28, 29 pages, and the rest of the book is just examples of cool introductions, examples of analogies, examples of cool speeches, of closings, and stuff like this. So it's one of those books that really, really, really work.
Amazing. I will get a copy too now.
Yeah, there is a modern-ish, not version, but like a modern equivalent of it. It also has a cool title. It's called Everything I Know About Life I Learned from PowerPoint. I know about life I learned from PowerPoint. It's written by a British dude who used to be a speechwriter slash, I don't know. He used to work in the British government, and he was one of the people who kind of pushed for migrating from speeches to slides and and so on. He has a very interesting take on like has a very interesting take on the philosophy of speeches versus slides and how PowerPoint really democratized a few things in itself. It's a nice take, but the stuff that he tells about how you put together a message, how you put together a story, how you put together slides, and what to include, what not to include is really awesome. And it's one of those books that I read in a few sittings, and that's not very characteristic to me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Abdo. Final question.
Yes.
Where can people find you if they want to nerd out about giving presentations, get your advice on how to polish their presentation and tell a better story? Where can they find you and reach out to you?
You can you can reach out to me on my website abdowahba.com, and I'm on LinkedIn, Abdo Wahba, just first name last name. If you look for me, you and make sure that the profile photo matches my ugly face, then you have the right person. I write a lot, not a lot, but I often write on LinkedIn about public speaking and presentations and storytelling in the business setting. And I started a series of videos. I don't know if you call 2 or 3 videos a series yet, but I'm going to be doing a series of very short videos between less than 3 minutes, like 2.5 minutes or so, every time by a nugget of storytelling, presentation, something that you're doing well, something that you should do differently, and so on. And for your audience, Sabrina, I'm going to offer something special, which is a complimentary coaching session for anyone in your audience who goes on my website or at least or goes to the URL abdowahba.com/freebie, FREEBIE, the word freebie. And anyone in your audience just can go to this link, abdowahba.com/freebie, and they can book a complimentary session. And if they show up, I will show up.
Amazing. That's really cool. Thank you so much, Abdo. That's very exciting. I've had the pleasure to enjoy your coaching, and it was extremely valuable. And beyond that, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise today. My key takeaway is the data is not the hero, it's the message
Yes.
that will stick with me, plus many other things, of course, but that's one just top of mind now. So thank you so much, Abdo.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed talking to you as usual, and hopefully we meet in person since we live less than 5 kilometers apart.
We must make that happen.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Abdo.
You're welcome.
And now a question to our listeners, a question to you, actually. What is your experience in telling stories with data? And how are you able to do that? What were your successes and setbacks? Finally, if you liked the episode just as much as I did, please share it with someone in your network who you think will take value from it. Go send them the link, share the episode with them, and give us a like and subscribe in your favorite streaming platform. And by doing that, you help to elevate the voice of our amazing guests. And today it was Abdo Wahba. Thank you, and see you next time.